Okay. Hello. Just give it 30 seconds or so to let other people join, and then I'll get started. If you've got any thoughts, any comments while we're in the during the process, just drop them into the chat. We'll try and bring some of the ones up that are kind of a little bit more interesting as we go. If you've got any emojis about your thoughts to raise at this point about the future of learning and how you feel about it, please put them in as well. Just give it a few more seconds and then we'll get moving. Okay, happy to start. Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us today on this LinkedIn Live. I'm Fred Thompson, the founder of Thirst, and today we're talking to you hopefully a little bit about the future of learning. I've been in L&D for around 20 years, but my background generally has always been around the technical side. I was a developer by trade previously, so generally the closest you probably get to the whole technological side of L&D. And my aim today really is to try and talk a little bit about the future of learning, about what you can actually do right now using AI technologies and items around that space, how you can actually implement them in L&D right away, but then also trying to look into the future and try to look at actually what's coming up, but mainly trying to dispel the reality, the marketing blurb to the reality really, and making sure that it's not a complete panic free-for-all of AI, and trying to see how you can actually engage with it and use it in L&D today. Okay, so let's start us off. First off, spoiler alert, don't worry about it. The robots aren't coming for your jobs. That's the easiest place to start when we're talking about AI and technology, and that's the default reaction that we have as humans. There's a great respected Swiss scientist called Konrad Gessner, who raised the alarm about the effects of information overload. He said it's going to be confusing and harmful to the mind, and the modern world overwhelms people with data. But he was a bit of a technophobe in terms of his life, Konrad. In fact, he wasn't. He was just a lot earlier than this age. He never interacted with emails and computers because he died in 1565. He was actually talking about information overload that was caused by the printing press and basically libraries of printed books. And the panic of the human race is default. When they don't understand something, when something changes, it gets into this panic stations that everybody thinks the world is changing and the world is ending. So first off, don't worry, the robots are not coming for your jobs. And also, to give you some history, AI as well in general has been around a lot longer than you think. So going back 1950, the Alan Turing test, that was a trick to see whether the machine can actually trick a human into thinking it's another human. That's kind of the earliest incarnation. AI is born in 1955. That was John McCarthy who actually coined that term for artificial intelligence. 1961, first industrial robot. That was actually on the production line at General Motors. And in 1965, the pioneering chatbot was actually named, I think, Eliza. Again, just giving you some context that whilst it's a panic and a FOMO at this point in time, AI is driven back sort of 70, 80 years or so in terms of when this was. So it's not a complete panic. But then also what happened is we hit an AI winter. So 1974 to 1996, effectively nothing really happened in AI. It had a lack of funding, a kind of lack of interest, a lack of computing power in it as well. It essentially meant that it went a little bit dormant, which is why I think coming back from 1996 onwards, it feels so kind of brand new and fresh. And again, I can see our marketing department, that image created by AI, so we can start to see how AI is already starting to change my presentations. And then in more recent terms again, so just a bit of a history lesson, evolution of AI, then from that point on, after that closed winter, 1997 Deep Blue, the chess machine that beat Kasparov, the robot dog, 1999, I think it was a Sony Aibo. Apparently, as you interacted with it, I think it would gain a personality or something similar. I'm not quite sure how that worked in truth. 2002, anonymous vacuum cleaner, the Roomba. I actually had one of these. They're a lot better now. Back when I had one in 2002, you had to lay tape on the floor and it largely kept falling downstairs. So yeah, you can see again, we've advanced quite a lot. 2014, we all know the Alexa. This is where the real modern incarnation of AI comes around, and from what we know about how it understands our natural language and how it processes that. I actually had, again, a very, very early incarnation of something similar. It was about 10 years prior to that, and it was a device that would recognize a noise that I had in the room, so I could like whistle or I could clap, and it would send out an infrared command. I had it all wired up, so I had a light switch in my room that would respond with an infrared command, and I could go in, walk into my room, clap, and it felt very HAL, and it would turn off the lights on and off, and it was fantastic. In principle, in practice, it didn't work at all, and largely I was stood in a room just clapping in darkness. So again, I'm grateful of the advances of AI, and I'm no longer in that scenario. I can now just ask Alexa to do this. And then more recently, we know about ChatGPT in 2022, and we're now at version 4, I think it is, and it's now seemingly just accelerating at pace what we can do. And with that, it is time L&D caught up. Learning development as a sector, we tend to be a little bit behind. We tend to be a little bit slow in terms of just latching onto the new and latest things. And I know when we was at the recent conference of learning technologies, after speaking to people, there was this fear of FOMO, of wanting to try and move as quick as we can with L&D. But my counter argument to this is it's quite beneficial really that we're a little bit behind on these things, because we get to evaluate them, make sure the tools we employ and the changes we make actually reflect what we're trying to achieve, learning objective wise, and trying to make sure that it actually has a purpose for L&D and isn't just there for their sake. So we've always got to match it back to objectives and outcomes. Now, the way people learn has changed for good. Obviously, COVID brought this along. You've heard a lot of this over the time, but looking at some 4 sort of items there, headlines: personalized experiences, not one size fits all, learn the flow of work, bite-sized content, and on demand. So looking at these, back historically at L&D, you would have to go to an on-site premise, you would sit in a large classroom, be taught by an instructor. Well, now you can do that on demand, of course. It's been progressed on through COVID as well. It's now becoming a primary delivery mechanism, but you're talking about bite-sized content. We're separating that content up a lot smaller. You're not just having to take 2 days out of your job role to go and actually understand that and engage in that training. You can get that in the flow of work. And as a result, you can get personalized experiences as well as you go through it. So you can make sure you can not just all given the same delivery, the same content. So a lot of ways learning has changed, and we need to make sure we catch up. And how do we kind of do this, employing hopefully the tools of AI and technology as we go? So are we ready to unlock the future of L&D? And maybe we can unlock it as happily as this woman is with her set of car keys, and progress on for L&D. So what I'm really going to focus on the first part. I've got 2 parts to this live today. First part is exactly what we can do today. You can employ these tactics right now. There's ways of doing this straight away after this call. The second part of this is about looking at the future. So the first part of this, voice is going, apologize. First part of this is looking at personalization. Now, this is the easiest implementation of AI that we already have. And as we mentioned here, it's everywhere. 3 examples: we've got Amazon, we've got Netflix, we've got Deliveroo. Amazon is probably the most familiar. You're used to seeing it. If you buy a television, Amazon tells you, hey, why don't you buy another television? Because that's what we've personalized for you, which oddly, statistically, makes sense that you're more likely to buy a second television after you bought a first, and it's generally because you're moving house or something similar. So it actually oddly makes sense. But Amazon's the one that you'll know. It recommends you personalized products based upon things you've already bought. But not a lot of people realize that the content you see on Netflix, the recommended shows, are based upon whether you seem to consume your crime thrillers or something similar. And you'll be getting a different set of content on Netflix by design to the next person. And then even fewer people know that the Deliveroo side of this as well is tailored based upon your culinary interest as well. So if you're more likely to consume burgers and pizzas, you're more likely to get recommended burger and pizza joints on your next time you open the app. So the key bit here, I think, is personalization, when it's done really well, is just invisible. You don't even notice it. You can't even tell that it's there. And it just aids the end user. It helps them make product purchases and decisions on what food they're going to eat and also what they're going to watch, without them realizing it's actually been personalized to their tastes. Personalization, though, can make a massive impact in L&D. We talk about these statistics we have. 6 times increase in employee engagement at companies that invest in personalized learning programs. Think about that in terms of employees who you have provided a personalized learning program to. They've got a 6 times increase in engagement. I mean, that's massive just from personalizing their learning program. 94% of them said it actually helped them achieve their learning goals just because it was personalized, and 42% said it was an increase in productivity because of that personalized learning as well. So if we add personalization into the mix in just the L&D, you're seeing that massive impact it can have not only on that end user, that employee, in terms of how they feel it helped them achieve their goals and also increase their productivity, but from a company point of view as well, you can just see that engagement has increased 6 times over. It's a massive delivery. Effectively, you want personalization as an L&D manager, and your staff and your colleagues do as well. So it's a no-brainer realistically. So personalization can level up L&D. How can? Well, let's first look at what actually can we personalize. So there's sort of 4 headline items here: content, style, length, and environment. Content, we're talking about things like the subject matter, the author, the source, all these different types of content that you can have. Effectively, we can start to think about how they may be personalized, or they may have different preferences for different people. Styles, now we're not talking about learning styles here, the contentious battle around learning styles, but we're talking about preferences. So we're talking about how is that content presented or delivered? Is that going to be an in-person, or is that going to be, as a video? That might be. The length, is it going to be a short? Is it going to be a long? Is it a full course? Is it going to be an in-person event? That's a 2-day event. The length of time as well. And also the environment, where is it delivered? How is it delivered? How is it consumed? So we're not talking about just laptops here, or we're talking about in the office or work or something similar. So we're starting to look at, we've got different ideas: content, style, length, and environment. 4 different ways, but each one of them has got a subset underneath it of how it can be different for each person on how they engage with the content in a greater way than others. So we'll have a look through now. Not only these are the things that you can personalize, but how do we personalize them? Well, content. Let's start off with content. We can have a look at the preferred author of the user, the preferred content source, or what skills it links to, or how the content is written, whether it's written in a first person or a third person along the way, or whether the learner seems to consume content that's a bit more clickbait driven, or is a long form article. There's different ways of that content that can be customized and still achieve the same objectives, still achieve the same aim, but effectively you're delivering it in a different way from a content side. Match that together with style. So style, we're talking about videos, or that might be a PDF document, or it might be a PowerPoint, or it might be an in-person or a Zoom call, or whatever you've got. Different people, again, are going to engage in different ways. A lot of people like learning from video content, but a lot of people don't watch video content at all and prefer to take that more offline approach. So you're starting to combine these 2 items together. You start to see how you can create these immersive learning experiences by adding that personalization in. Then we talk about length. Let's take video as the example. Say you've chose video as the style where the length can be important. Is it a 1-hour video, or a 30-second clip, or a 5-minute video? If that's a course, an in-person course, 1 day, 2 day, 1 hour, what's that like? And again, it might be the same content author, the same style of video, but actually that length is important just because, again, people consume it in different ways and are engaged with learning content in much different approaches. And lastly, we're talking about the environment. And like I just alluded to, we're not just talking about whether that's laptop or desktop or computer or mobile, but we're also talking about whether that's in person or in an office or on a train, or if they've got 5 minutes somewhere out and about on a mobile device while they're walking. There's different ways of effectively tailoring that content. And you might find these personalized elements actually change as well based upon that environment. So, the length of a video being 30 seconds is perfect if you're on your mobile on a train. But actually, if you're in the office, you might want a video still, but it might actually want to be 30 minutes in length because that's more you're sat down, ready to learn longer form content. So you mix them up. We've got lots of different ways: content author, style, sources, videos, types, lengths, environments, etc. And you can combine and play with any different kind of combination of personalization there to show how you can tailor the same learning content effectively, but to different target markets effectively from there. But how can we do that? Because there's loads of different ways you can do that, and you can't really manage that manually. So that's when we start talking about where AI can come in. And that's where we can use AI to create magical learning experiences, and we can make people as happy as the 5 people at the bottom of this slide are with the AI. But effectively, there's just too many different methods to personalization. There's too many ways that we can personalize that we need to lean on the technology to do this for us. And personalization has always worked, but until you can start to lean on something that's going to do this automatically and quickly, really it's a too time consuming job or role for someone to do without the real benefit. So you start to use that AI side. So remember, all of this exists. These tools already exist at this point. So let's have a look at them. Well, how do we make personalization a part of your learning culture today, using these AI tools? So we've got 3 actionable parts here that you can actually do. We've got adaptive learning platforms, micro-learning, and trends-based content curation. So first off, adaptive learning platform. It's the most shameless plug for the giant orange t-shirt with the big logo on that I've got now. This is our platform. This is what we do. This is an adaptive learning platform, how it can help you. But it's not just us. There are others out there. But choosing the right platform, and I assure you that's where the plug ends, but choosing the right platform can be the way to deliver this correctly. So you can choose a platform that has AI tailored into it. It can personalize the learning for you. It's doing half of that job. It's monitoring what types of content people are consuming, how they're consuming that, and starts to look to tailor that content. So choosing a platform to do it that already exists, already has this tool set built into it, is going to make a big difference to basically being able to deliver that personalized part for the learning culture. But that's not all. So even if you've got that in place, you're then talking about a micro-learning element to that. So you need to be able to break this content up into small enough chunks that the actual learning platform can take this and start to personalize this to the end user. So if you've got one course and it's 3 hours long and that's all you've got, there's nothing to really personalize despite having the best learning platform in place. It's not going to be able to tailor and personalize that content. So you want to break that learning down into bite-sized modules, personalized, and then you can then experiment with the different types of delivery, whether that's a video or PDFs or in-person events, and you can or SCORM courses, we all know. But the learning platform can then team that up together and start to really tailor that personalization together. And then lastly, on these 3 kind of actionable things that you can do now to make personalization part of your learning culture right now, is just monitor the trends that you're seeing as part of hopefully your learning platform, but also just across the board, and actually start to curate the content based upon it. It's no good starting to notice that your learners are actually all engaged with videos of 30 seconds long if all you've got is 3-hour-long courses in PDF format. You're going to have to change that way. So you need to be constantly analyzing these trends that you can see. You need to look at your analytics. You need to look at this data that's out there and start to spot the trend, and then curate your content based upon that. So when you're curating your content that's matching what trends are being shown, you're breaking that into personalizable chunks, and then bringing that together with a learning platform that's adaptive and has these AI personalization in there. That personalization just becomes embedded into your learning culture and really doesn't add a tremendous amount of time to your everyday daily job as it goes. It's going to come about it's a slight change in terms of breaking up that content and analyzing it more, but you are using the technology effectively to achieve what you want to achieve. Lastly, on this kind of section, I just want to kind of highlight really what the actual reason why do we care, why are we even doing this? And just some of these are kind of obvious, but they kind of flow into each other. So why would we personalize for L&D teams? It sounds like a great thing. We've seen the statistics. It's talking about 6 times engagement, etc. But it's higher engagement and motivation. You're seeing learners who are actually being presented the learning content that they want to consume. That it's learning content that's right for them. It's right in their delivery. It's a video content, etc. That's going to lead to the higher engagement and motivation amongst your teams. As a result of that, you're going to have enhanced outcomes, because if you've got that engagement, you've got that motivation, your outcomes just naturally come out the back of that. Theoretically, less burden on the L&D teams in general, because if you can break that down into bite-sized chunks, use adaptive learning platforms and actually personalize that at that level, then you're getting a personalized experience for the end user without having to manually hold the hand of each individual learner directly. So while I joke and say, the robots are not coming for your jobs, effectively we should be able to reduce the burden on our L&D teams to manage this, and also allow them to have more time to focus on other areas like trend analysis. As a result, you get customized learning pathways. You're getting that pathway as a result of just personalization. You're going to end up with the same end result, the same training, the same delivery, but you've delivered it in different ways at different presentations with a different customized learning pathway. And ultimately, buzzwords at the moment, upskilling and reskilling, just leads to faster upskilling and reskilling because you can get personalized content that matches the skills that people are seeking and in demand. So it's quite an obvious one when you kind of think about it, but it's nice to have them written down and say, why would we personalize? So that brings me to the first part of this, which is these are the actual points you can do today. Personalization exists. We can use AI to do that. We can look at the 3 actionable points, which is micro-learning, analyzing the trends, and also using an adaptive learning platform like Thirst to achieve that. And you can see the statistics back that up from an employee and from a L&D manager perspective and the highlighted benefits of that. So what I want to do now is talk about a little bit around the future. Where's that going? What can we do? And where is it taking us? So, bringing us straight on to the buzzword of today, which is you can't simply avoid this if you go anywhere at the moment. Everything is AI, everything is generative, everything is chat GPT. You're creating images, textual content, replies, all articles, songs, whatever that might be. And that's what generative AI effectively is. And I'll just show you a little bit around the kind of headlines of what actually that term means and how it sort of operates at a high level. But what's key to kind of point out first, I think, is there's a lot of FOMO to this. There's a lot of fear of missing out when the latest, greatest tech, especially tech innovation comes out, and it's moving fast, and it feels like it's moving fast at the moment. Everyone's trying to jump on it. And there are some vendors out there who do offer sort of tools like this, generative AI. You can start to see it in popular tools like email replies in Gmail, or try and guess the replies back to you. You can kind of put that into Photoshop now, which is creating images. One of the best use cases I've seen of it. It's fantastic. Tools like Notion will try and generate some content as well. But we've always got to bring that back and say, well, why are we doing that for L&D? What's it going to benefit us? And I think that's the key question that I don't think we've really answered yet. The tech's getting there. People are wanting to jump on the bandwagon and put that in, but you've got to really ask yourself the question of ignoring the FOMO, ignoring the missing out part of this. What's it actually going to give us, and why is it a benefit? So generative AI, lots of people don't necessarily understand how that works, and it is a kind of a complex art, but essentially this is very high level, but 3 parts to this. It's forming a database initially. It's a large language model, effectively all the data it consumes. It's trained on a set of data over a period of time, and it starts to form relationships and links between that. So it will start to establish that, all these pictures look alike, and we think that's a cat, and all these other images are cats, and then it'll have a good idea of what a cat looks like, and it can start to generate images of cats. So forms that database first, then you import a prompt, which will say, please give me a picture of a dog wearing a hat who's also on a trampoline or something similar, not a common one that I've typed in, but yeah. And you can effectively input that prompt, and then 3, it will generate that content. And that's what generative AI is. It's about using that large language model to try and map all this together and generate new and original content that doesn't already exist, trying to produce something that's not just regurgitated from what already is there. So we used it, Chat GPT, OpenAI, to try and tell us a joke for an L&D, a joke that only L&D professionals will understand. And you can read the joke. I'm not even sure it makes sense. It is certainly not funny. Why did the instructional designer break up with their significant other? Because they kept asking them to chunk it down. It sort of makes sense, but you can kind of see it's getting there. But of course, again, this is a FOMO side of it. It's working. It's come up with its own original joke. But again, it's understanding of this. You've got to kind of vet this through. We've still got a long way to go to get this right. However, it does have the potential to revolutionize L&D. And here's 3 items that I've kind of picked out that I think are the kind of the key bits that I think can actually provide that value at the end, that learner objectives, them outcome-based AI here. So automated content creation. Well, we can start to use that to create content, actually learning content that's relevant. Now, you can't at this point in time say, hey, write me a course on, how to build an aircraft. It's not going to happen. It's not going to work. But what you can use it for already in its form is to say, hey, I want to write a health and safety course. And there's a section on this around making sure you position a ladder correctly against the wall. And I can't remember what that ladder position is, and I want to make sure the guidance is right. Well, we can use generative AI, and it can generate us a paragraph, a sentence, or a little bit of interaction, or even an image that will give us the right information about the correct angle for that ladder, for instance, and we can start to create content that is perfect for our end users and our end learners. You just have to be a little bit careful because, whilst we've seen the L&D joke side, it does work to an extent, but you do need to vet that. You do need to sort of monitor that for its content and validate what it's writing is correct. On the automated content creation as well, though, you can use it to refactor content. So when we talked about personalization in the last sector, in terms of people might sort of engage with content more if it's in the first person or the third person written or whatever that might be, you can refactor the content to be more friendly or more formal or written in different contexts as well. And that's going to be great for that content creation side. So it will save L&D's team's time and effort. The robots are not coming for your jobs again. You're still there. You're still going to need to vet that at this point in time. But again, reduction of the time, streamlining that, it's more efficient throughout, and we can create content that's snappier, faster, and delivered a lot quicker to our end users. Enhanced accessibility, chatbots and virtual assistants. We've all used these. They're largely terrible. If you ask it some questions, they don't sort of give you any useful answers largely. But they are getting better. But there's a good use case here to be able to implement chatbots in L&D and say, you can ask it, hey, can you tell me the last 5 people who've completed this compliance course, who have also got this skill? It should be able to analyze that and give you statistics and analytics back from an L&D manager's perspective. But we can also use that on a self-serve as well. So your end users can ask it, hey, I want the latest training on my HubSpot marketing platform. How do I add a lead or whatever that might be? It can automatically be dragging that out. It can understand the context of how it's written, what it relates to, and effectively assist as well. So this generative AI is using not only for content creation, but also for responding. And then lastly, predictive analytics. It's kind of edging on the side of the generative AI side of this. It isn't completely generative AI, but I think predictive analytics is something that's really interesting where we can go. And it's about trying to predict the future, what you're seeing from your L&D, and trying to predict where you can then head. So if you're starting to see there's an engagement in a certain skill and there's some content, it can start to look at how it can predictively analyze what the likeliness is of the prevalence of that skill across your organization, or what skills are going to be required in the future and what types of content, and using that predictive analytics to basically form the strategy for your L&D going forward. So it can identify areas and proactively address issues ahead of time before they become problems. Again, reducing that burden on the L&D side. I'll just take a slight drink before I run out of breath because I'm talking as I go. There's a couple of questions coming in as we go. If you've got any more questions, fire them through because I'll answer them at the end or try my best to. I did just want to kind of raise this one, which is Ellen Masterson, which said the joke is hilarious though. So it does have some sort of resonance with some people. We'll have to try and see how we can test its boundaries in terms of how many more L&D jokes we can get it to try. But yeah, sort of finishing up on the generative AI side of this, the state of AI in L&D as it is at this moment in time. Now, this is actually 2020s from LinkedIn Learning Report. So it's going back a little bit. And obviously, we've had the COVID side and the way this has changed a little bit as well. I actually think the stats here are quite high. So currently using AI, 78%. That seems like that question's a bit wide. Are you just using it in general somewhere across the board? Yes, rather than actually using it in your L&D platform. But you're looking at that and say 78% currently using it, 64 planning and 57 interested. There is an interest in this whole sector, in this whole kind of technology in L&D and how we can utilize it. So, you're not alone when you're kind of having that FOMO because everybody else is moving that way as well. Okay. Then moving us on. So lastly on this piece, in the same way we did on the predictive benefits of generative AI for L&D, and I'll get to a few questions as well at the end. They're similar-ish to the personalization, but they give you just different benefits realistically. They're all aimed around their objectives, learning outcomes. But turbocharged content curation and creation, we talked about how that can do that. If you're starting to refactor, repurpose content in different ways to map that with personalization as well, to be able to create small bite-sized chunks on fast-moving topics, things that are compliance-based, but new legislations come out, you might need to write something quite quick. You can start to use generative AI to do that. From a subject matter expert side, it's going to give you that leg up. It helps then with the personalized experiences side because you're starting to create that content. Lightning fast upskilling, similar sort of thing, but it's just effectively allowing you to quickly create content. Once you establish the trends and the skills that you've got, you can use that generative AI without having to go and seek that necessarily that large bank of course or training associated with it. You can start to create some micro learning pieces. It doesn't replace that, but it gives you sort of more ability to provide upskilling faster. Cost savings, the robots are not coming for your jobs, but it does provide cost savings again. Because effectively we're trying to generate, create and curate content a little bit faster with a little bit less manual labor and a bit more automation. And as a result, it becomes very scalable across the board. And as you get more and more users, you can use it and lean on it more. And it's not going to mean that you have to, completely add massive amounts of resources to your L&D team in order to achieve it as well. So quite a lot of different strategies there on how the benefits of generative AI. So I'm just going to pause here just before questions. I just want to finally just recap. So hopefully at today's session, I've kind of gone two things. One is what you can do straight away today. You can use personalization, you can chunk that content down. You can use an adaptive learning platform like Thirst, and you can also analyze them trends and start to curate your content based upon it. That exists, works really well. You already see it in operation. A lot of platforms like Amazon, Netflix, etc. Generative AI exists. It's in some L&D platforms. It's just not quite as robust. It's not quite as thought out. There's risks with it. There's a delivery making sure that the consistency of the content is valid, that it's actually truthful across the board. It doesn't cause any offense. There's a few more risks. We've got a bit of a way to go to get that to map to outcomes. But if you're kind of thinking along this way and trying to put personalization in, that's going to lead you this way in generative AI. And ultimately means then that the future is pretty good for this generative AI path. But just don't get too carried away right now, I guess. So yeah, heading on to questions. So we've got a few questions in. I've gone full screen, very nice. Always nice to see my face in large full screen. So yeah, dealing with the first one. LinkedIn user, I am curious about the stats you shared earlier on how about the impact of personalized learning. How was the impact measured, and what do you imagine its applicability to varied context? Yeah, so the analytics that we've shared all of today are all from statistical reports that have actually been done externally to us. So I think it'll be referenced at the bottom as to where this report has been come from. And what we will do as well is we will share this slide deck to anyone who's on the live today as well. So you can actually start to look at that and link through and read exactly where that impact has come from and where it is. I think the question's interesting though about, I imagine its applicability to varied context, because I think a lot of the studies that are typically done on this, and which is why you have to take it with a little bit of pinch of salt, are done a bit more broader. And, there's certain job roles and positions and sectors that are going to differ in terms of even just the type of person that wants to engage with certain parts of it and is a bit more brazen towards this kind of approach as well. So, yeah, you do have to take it with a pinch of salt, but all the links are in there from all of the statistics we've shown today. Any more questions? Any suggestions for predictive analytics model in L&D? Yeah, you can use business intelligence dashboards are starting to put this into place. I promised it was my last shameless plug of the Thirst platform, but Design have put in, it's a product from Amazon, it's called AWS QuickSight, but we bake that into the platform. It's a business intelligence dashboard. And we're baking that in, and we record absolutely everything in our platform. So we record, every interaction, every comment, every like, every share, every completion, every engagement, every view, every skill you achieve or look to achieve, all of that. And we bake all that in. And then these business intelligence dashboards, and it doesn't, again, have to be us in our platform, but if you can link that with an external tool, they will tend to provide predictive analytics tools in there. So that will look at that and say, okay, you do have to sort of put some basics behind this and say, here's the amount of, I don't know, let's keep it basic, but here's the amount of completions I've got, of this content or of this skill. How many completions am I going to get in the next 3 weeks or a month or something similar? And these business intelligence dashboards, there's a Microsoft one as well out there, as well as a few others. I've got, it escaped my name of what it's called, the Microsoft BI one, but there's a few that you can use. The only key bit is making sure you get a learning platform that can interact and interoperate with, whether it's got one baked in or not. You want to make sure it can send out, Dynamics I think was the one thing. You want to be able to send out, it can send out to that or not, because that's going to base whether you can then start to analyze that data or not. So there's quite a few, but you need to lean outside of L&D for predictive analytic models, but just apply L&D content within them to get the right data at this stage. when you say robots are not going for your jobs, is it just for the L&D industry or in general? It's a great question, isn't it? My personal opinion, from being close to it in tech, and I was part of the kind of the hype around the wave, probably sort of like maybe 10, 15 years ago, when everybody was talking about AI then. And it was very, very thin as a tech implementation then. It was largely a set of rules and not really artificial at all or intelligence at all. It was largely a rule-based assessment. And it's still, to this day, not that far off that. It's just the language, or the large models have got larger, so there's more analytical data. The one thing I'd say, as humans, we're very, very good at inventing jobs and roles and positions and things to do. And as a result, we will always find a space and there'll always be a need for it. So when AI comes in, you just implement a new series of, people behind that, a lot of areas of jobs that didn't exist. I think there's some great stats around jobs which didn't exist sort of 5 or 10 years ago, and it's things like vloggers and social media managers and all these sort of roles there, which as part of tech led that into job roles that didn't exist previously. So it's going to change. They're not coming for your job, but your job is going to slightly change. But I mean, that's true even in L&D. Your job is going to change because you're going to have to work with these tools and make sure they're right. But you're not suddenly not needed. It's just going to be a case of you're going to have to learn how to analyze them and utilize them for the best benefit you've got, I think, as you go. So I'm just trying to avoid the scaremongering, robots are coming for your jobs. I say it in jest, really. What advice would you give when approaching AI learning-based strategies today? It's probably similar to what I've said most of here today, in terms of making sure at present, I would focus on personalization. I would focus on reducing the size of the learning content and increasing the styles of the learning content, and then using personalization-based AI to try and drive the best results, because we've all sat through page turners, clicking next to do that compliance course we need to do, and it's largely horrible. And you as L&D managers want people to feel like they like it and they engage with it and want to complete that. And the only way to do that is to appeal to how they want it to be delivered. And you see the kind of social platforms in terms of like Facebook and things like that, and TikTok, they'll be presenting content to you that you're consumed in, and your TikTok's going to look different to mine because I've interacted with it a different way, but it's engaging for me and it's engaging for you. We want to try and achieve the same things for AI learning-based strategies today, which is focus on the outcomes in terms of you've got to deliver the same messaging at the end, you've got to deliver the same objectives and achievement. Basically, it's still going to tick the same box, they understand the same knowledge, but how you get there can be very different. So I think you can start to look to add variance to how the learning content is supplied and surfaced, really, and just utilizing the technology to do what it's really good at, which is handling lots of different inputs and all at once, and trying to evaluate a path out of that, really, I think. Okay, that looks like it brings us to the end of our questions. Final point on this, and I'll leave the slide up and make it a little bit larger. We do have a free ebook as well. You can scan this on the screen now. If you can't scan it in time, not a problem. We should be reaching out for anyone who's sort of joined the stream today. It's also should be hopefully on the screen. I don't know whether I share on the screen, but we'll share it with the email of everyone who's on here as well, and they'll be able to see that. And then you get a free ebook which got more information of how AI will change the future of L&D as well, and we'll hopefully share the slide deck as well with you from today. I've noticed one other question has come in. Is there evidence for AI adoption and faster upskilling? Increasing usage and engagement may not mean learners have acquired new skills. Yeah, that is a really good question. And it's kind of what, I guess I probably missed it, but it's probably around my idea of FOMO and trying to say, you can't just run at these things because AI is actually what you think's the coolest thing. You've got to actually map that back and say, where's the evidence? Where is this actually going to increase? Now, it's still an early curve here. So finding absolute direct evidence to say, the theory goes, it's leading to faster upskilling because you're going to be able to create personalized content. And you're going to be able to create content faster and personalize, which theoretically is going to result in that. But you have the balance of it can just flood the system with a lot of data that isn't quite right and is ultimately going to slow them down as well. And I think this is where L&D is right to take its time a little bit and make sure that it uses the tools, but always keeps thinking about what the end delivery is and evaluates that. You've got to watch the trends. You've got to analyze still with the consumers of the content, the learners, and say, Are you actually starting to feel that this content is the right content? And you can see this on high level when you get the analytics in. But you'll be able to just engage directly as well and start to get that feedback. So, and you talk about a very quick second point as well around whether they've acquired new skills. There's another part of this as well, which is skills-based platforms at the moment tend to be a little bit like, yep, you've got a skill or you've not got a skill, and there's very little evaluation that you actually are achieving that skill. This is something we're currently solving in Thirst as we go forward, and we're looking at trying to do cohort and peer-to-peer assessments of actual understanding of that skill, and so we can actually provide an assessment tool set to be able to make sure you've done that. So both questions there in that kind of one bit are really kind of hit on the right points, which is actually we've got to be cautious around AI and make sure we do start to see and map that to outcomes and actually start to see engagement and skills increase as a result. Okay, I will finish up there and we'll send it through, like I said, slide deck and the ebook available. And yes, thank you very much. Please feel free to contact me on LinkedIn if you've got any further questions that arrive to you after this as well. But thank you very much for joining us today.